Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm Iconic, the podcast that delves into the heart of pressing social issues, seeking understanding, and fostering change. In today's episode, we embark on a journey to explore the intricate dynamics of youth justice and the pervasive phenomenon known as the school's prison pipeline. As we navigate the complex landscape of criminal justice, one glaring reality comes into focus: the alarming trajectory faced by far too many young people, particularly those from marginalised communities. This trajectory, often referred as to the school to prison pipeline, represents a systematic issue that perpetuates cycles of incarceration and disenfranchisement. Picture this: a young student full of potential and dreams enters the door of their school eager to learn and grow, but instead of finding support and encouragement, they encounter harsh disciplinary measures, disproportionate punishments, and a lack of resources. Slowly, they find themselves funneled into a path that leads not to success but to incarceration. How do we arrive at this point? What systematic factors contribute to the entrapment of our youth within the confines of the criminal justice system? And most importantly, what can we do to break free from this destructive cycle? These are the questions that we will explore today, guided by the wisdom and expertise of our esteemed guest, Azi Azonga, a dedicated criminologist committed to reshaping the narrative surrounding youth justice. Together, we will uncover the root cause of the schools to prison pipeline, shed light on the challenges faced by young people within the system, and eliminate pathways towards a more just and equitable future. So join us as we embark on this crucial conversation, challenging assumptions, amplifying voices, and forging a path towards positive change. Together, let us break barriers, empower our youth, and redefine what it means to seek justice in our society. Before we begin, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as this allows us to continue doing the work that we're doing. So let's get started. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Okay, so my name is Azi Azonga. I am of African heritage. My parents are from Cameroon, and I was born here. I was born in London, and I have a younger brother and a sister. I have a nephew as well. And at this precise moment in time, I completed my master's. So I have a master's in youth justice, community safety, and applied criminology. It's something that I'm really proud of. And currently, I work in a college in East London where I'm head of behaviour and intervention, and I basically just work with challenging youths, young people ages 16 to 19, and just try and redirect them onto the right path and just not allow their emotions to get in the way of their future and then making poor decisions at college.
Can you tell us a bit about what led you to specialise in criminology, particularly focusing on youth justice?
It took me a while to get to this path. It just wasn't something that was installed in me from when I was a child. I would say moving to London it would about been around 2013 with my sister. So moving to London, that was quite a big moment for us, because that was what actually led me to get to this point where I am right now. So when I first moved, one of my first jobs was as a teaching assistant in a school based in East London. And these kids had really challenging behaviors and learning disabilities as well. And I just remember thinking, wow, like this, I don't think I can do this kind of job, because there was a very violent incident that happened where one of the students actually physically assaulted the head teacher. And I remember witnessing that and thinking, this job is not for me. I don't understand how a child that so young, I think the child was about 13, can just become so enraged to the point where they're actually attacking a member of staff. And I just remember that from that incident, we all had to take statements because the police got involved. And I just remember thinking, this is crazy. Like, what am I doing here? And then ended up staying there for like a year, and I ended up really liking it. After that incident happened, things got resolved. The child didn't get arrested, but things did get resolved. The charges basically had more workers working with him and would go out a lot more to release his anger and to deal with his emotions. And yeah, so that went past, and then I ended up enjoying it, and I ended up leaving after a year and a bit. And then I remember just saying to my friends, like, what I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what path to go down. I'm not sure what career path to go down. I always just knew it was always young people. I always knew it would be young people, but I just wasn't sure. And then as years went by, and just me working in different kind of organizations, but still with young people, I then started working in another place, which was a couple of years ago, where I was working as a youth at risk matrix worker. So we basically prevent young people from entering the youth justice service. Just basically mentor them, take them to outings, events, do activities with them, just ensure that they're on the right path, you know. But the way we were allowed to do it is you can visit them if they're high risk. So if they're more likely to get arrested by the police, you can go and see them like twice a week. And then if they're not as high risk, so they're quite low risk, but they're still hanging around with, peers that are going to enter the youth justice service, we were able to then see them once a week. And I really liked that. And I ended up doing that for it was nearly 2 years. And then after that, I then went into the youth justice service, where I was actually working with young people that had actually been arrested from the age of, I don't know if you know much about it, but from the age of 10, a child can get arrested in this country.
Yeah, they
And
can.
then they're classed as youth all the way from 10 to 17. So that's just basically when I just decided, let me do that. And because I had no credentials in that, that's what made me decide to actually just do my master's in youth justice, community safety, and applied criminology.
That was a very long path, but it all had like the same sort of purpose behind it. Um,
Yeah, it was.
can you share a pivotal moment or experience from your background that solidified your commitment to working with young people in the criminal justice system?
Yeah, sure. So I think I left this part out in the beginning, but another reason for why I chose this path was because of my upbringing. So I was raised by my mum, my dad, and my siblings, obviously, until my siblings were around, sorry. So I was raised by my mum and my dad until I was 9 years old. So after 9 years old, my dad then basically just left. He left. He basically left and said he was going to go back to Cameroon, where he had a business, and he was a journalist at the time. But in the UK, he was actually a head on his way to being a head teacher. But so he was on the way to do that. He decided to go back to Cameroon, and from then on, we just never seen him ever again. I haven't seen him. We haven't seen him, but it just got quite. Looking back on it now, it really did impact my behavior in terms of the way I like create relationships, the way that I would interact with people, the way how I would allow certain things to happen, the way that I lacked certain boundaries, the way I was very unsure of myself, the way I had a lot of rage. I had a lot of rage in me. I had a lot of rage. I was a very angry person, and it took me a lot for me to realize that. Obviously, when you're a child, not obviously, but when you are young, you're not self-aware, and plus your brain hasn't fully developed either. Your brain is nowhere near developed, so you're going to continue to make these silly mistakes or things where you're not thinking, oh, this is going to impact my future, or this is going to impact my health, or this is going to impact my best friend. You're not really thinking like that because you're child, you're a child. So you're not really thinking, oh, if I do this today, it's going to come and bite me back in 2 years or anything like that. But the point I'm trying to make is I had a lot of rage in me, and in school, I'm not trying to say I was violent like that, but I would sometimes get into fights, peer fights, and I would also just be quite argumentative with teachers as well, and some peers as well, extremely argumentative. Then when I went to college, this is when it all changed actually. So when I went to college, it all changed because I remember one of my teachers, her name's called Ade, and she was a black woman just like me. And I remember her saying to me, you know, when you get older, and at the time I was like 17, she was like, when you get older, you're gonna have to work 10, 20 times harder because you're a black woman. And I didn't understand what she meant. But she started to meet me on a regular basis and just check in on me. And then she was like to me, what do you want to do? Like, I can see that you're going through stuff, but that shouldn't be an excuse. And she was like, do you not want to go to university? Do you not want to do that? And I was just like, I don't see myself going to university. And she was like, but you can. If you really want to, you really can. How about let's make a deal. If you meet me every week until you finish college, like once a week for an hour or so, let's just take it from there. And I did that. And I ended up going to university for my first time in Birmingham. And then I just remember being in Birmingham and literally just reflecting back on my life and just thinking that if I didn't have someone like Ade who actually called me out on my behavior, only God knows where I would be at this moment in time. But she actually believed in me. And I thought that was quite powerful. And that's what, without realizing, now that I'm thinking about it, that's what I've actually carried without even realizing that a lot of these young people that I work with, I'll say majority, all of them, I believe in all of them. I want the best for all of them. And sometimes it's frustrating because they can't see the path that they're going down. But sometimes it takes maybe not just me, another adult that they probably trust for them to realize and think, you know what, this is what I want. And yeah, that's where my journey stemmed from my dad leaving to me spiraling out of control a little bit, to then me going to college and then me going to university and me thinking, now that I look back on it, a lot of these young people, they struggle to manage their emotions. And I'm able to relate to that because I struggled with the same thing.
Absolutely. I think often it's just that at least one right person can really change your trajectory. I feel like
Mm-hmm,
that's the case. I feel like a lot of people do not believe in young people, and that's the problem. And they forget that they just need the extra help and guidance. And
mm-hmm,
but without the right person, like for most of their life, they go to a point where they just do not care.
mm-hmm,
And why should they if nobody else is invested in their future or their
mm-hmm.
current life circumstances? Um, in your opinion, what what are some of the most like pressing issues facing young people within the system today?
There's quite a few. I would say their environment, definitely. You've got their environment, and then you've also got the schools, and you've got how they are. Some of them are treated in schools. So, what I mean by that is there's this. So, in my dissertation, my research was actually based on school to prison pipeline. I don't know if you know much about it, but I won't. I won't go in too deep, but I will just touch the surface. So, it basically school to prison pipeline talks about how um, black minority kids or black ethnic kids, especially the boys, are 3 to 4 times more likely to get permanently excluded and suspended from school down to their behavior. And it's like something you've always known, but until you've done the research, it's quite shocking because the numbers are extremely high. There's research out there to back it, and there's still ongoing research to back it as well. And it is quite scary because you would think a lot of professionals should already be aware of things like this, but they're clearly not. And they are continuing, not all, some are still continuing to discriminate. So that's another thing that these kids are up against, is discrimination because of the color of their skin, because of how they conduct themselves, because of where they've come from. So you could have somebody, for example, just call him Timmy, who's quite calm and collective and not as loud, compared to someone who's called Paul, who's quite loud, who may be seen as aggressive. And Paul is more likely to get permanently excluded due because of how he is conducting himself. And what I would say personally is there needs to be more training around how professionals deal with children like that. You've also got a lot of children that are going into pupil referral units. So that's what it is. So with school to prison pipeline, basically what it is in a nutshell, it starts off with, let's say, Paul. Paul is in a normal mainstream school, and Paul is misbehaving in class, and he's starting to get a bit of a name for himself. So he's the class clown. But him being like that is disrupting the other 29 students from learning in class. So the teacher ends up, just always having a go at him all the time. And that label's now starting to stick with him because that is what he's getting used to. A couple of weeks go by, he's still displaying the same kind of behavior. So he ends up being told to leave the class. So he's now told to wait outside the classroom until he calms down. A couple of weeks go by, he kind of listens. Now he's allowed back in the classroom, but then now it turns into him going to the head teacher's office. So the teacher's now really fed up of his behavior because now she's not able to teach in the class. So he gets sent to the head teacher's office. And then, words are exchanged. He's, given his third or fourth or fifth final warning about how he should conduct himself in a school. And then that doesn't still change. So eventually with that, he then gets suspended. He then returns from his suspension and is allowed to go back to class as normal, but the behavior is still getting worse. And with that now, he now becomes permanently excluded. So after that, his options are to go to a pupil referral unit, or he gets managed moved to another school. His parents decide to option with him going to Peru because they think it'll be a new environment. There's two things here. With a managed move, you don't specifically stay in that school. But what happens is when a child does get moved to another school for a short period of time, because they can't go back to that school, they have to wear their uniform, which is very weird because if they're wearing their uniform and they're going to another school that's wearing a complete different uniform, already that's discrimination in my eyes. So that child is already standing out from his peers because his uniform is completely different to his other peers. And then the second option is, the going to the PRU, the pupil referral unit, where you've got a lot of other kids that are just as similar or even worse. And, in some PRUs as well, it's like a prison. So you can't just walk around freely. You have to have, your teacher has to have a pass to allow you to go to the toilet, to allow you to go outside the gate. It's very interesting. That's all I'm going to really say. It's very interesting, but this is where a child of Black Paul will end up. And with that in their mind, it's he's got two options here. He can either keep his head down and decide to do really well in that school, or he thinks, I've got friends here that are just like me. I've got nothing to lose. So he ends up going down the wrong path. And then with that, he gets permanently excluded from a pupil referral unit. And then now he's out on the streets because he hasn't got a schedule. He doesn't have a schedule to go by. And then after that, he ends up getting arrested for criminal activity. So that's the school to prison pipeline in a nutshell. But I think with that is why I decided to write that was because, again, it just ties in with a lot of what our young people are facing. And a lot of them need help. As much as some of them, I don't know the kinds of young people you've interacted with, but I know with young people, some of them have a facade on because of probably where they've come from, what they've been through. A lot of them had to fend for themselves. A lot of them have come from broken homes. A lot of them have had parents that are drug addicts, parents that have been in and out of jail. So it's like they're just living off survival skills. And a lot of them go down the path of selling drugs because they're too young to have their national insurance number. And it's a thing where if they don't get money, how are they meant to eat? How are they meant to survive?
Yeah,
So
I think
there's a lot. I can't give you a straightforward answer because there's just so much to unpick from that. Their body image issues, you know, seeing themselves as British, even though they were from a Bengali background or a Cameroonian background or a Congolese background, there's culture clashes there in the household. So it's just there's friendship groups. When you look at the TV right now, you've got drug dealers being glamorized. So I say to them, it's really good that you need to, inspire to go to university if that's what you want, get a legitimate job. But then, when you've got a lot of shows out there that are glamorizing drug dealing, it's difficult. It's so difficult. So they are faced up so much.
it's so many people, I feel like, have these expectations of children and young people, but they're doing to have those expectations, they need to be in an environment where they thrive or even like, survive to a good enough level. But none of that is provided. So how do you expect them to conduct themselves a certain way? And people often forget to realize that. I think that happens quite often from my personal lived experience, and then like my professional. I don't know why I did that. My professional experience, because there is that like I don't have the environment at home, I don't have the environment at school, and then you want me to behave a certain way. And I feel like the little small changes that can be doable are just
Hmm.
not done. And then
Hmm.
people get upset, frustrated, and it just escalates and escalates and escalates. And people wonder why. I'm like, there's simple solutions you can do that cost you absolutely nothing, from the way you interact with young people to the way that, you might just do like, check-ins or something like that. Very small things. If you do that every day, it just becomes a very natural thing. Remember when I was in this place, I would ask this place of work, and I would ask this person, "Are you okay?" That's it. It's not like, "Are you good? Are you bad?" Nothing. "Are you okay?" It's very neutral. Every single morning, we might and like, "Yeah, whatever." And then it's like, "Yeah, whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not feeling the best today." And then it was like, "Yeah, we don't have enough food at home." After a few, like, after a week or so, and then it just kept on. And one day, I think I was busy doing something. I got completely distracted, and the person came to look for me, be like, "You didn't ask me today how I was."
Hmm.
Because that actually makes a difference. They do notice when something changes or something's out of the ordinary or something that they benefited from, something that was very, very small, how big of an impact it has. And yeah, and then we had our morning check-ins and stuff like that. And it's just like, I feel like sometimes what you do with an employee is what you kind of do with them. Is like you do the check-ins
Hmm.
on a regular basis. You might do it several times a week informally, and then much more formal sessions every week or every 2 weeks or whatever they require. You know,
Hmm.
something simple as that. And you know, yeah, the prison pipeline. I feel like so many people like ADHD, Liberty. I think they're on like in the next few weeks. People like them who work on the school to prison pipeline as well, because it's becoming such a common issue.
Yeah, it
And the
has.
people that keep ending up in that system is people with special educational needs and
Yeah,
disabilities, neurodivergent individuals, care experience. So it's just really important to talk about a topic like this.
absolutely.
How do you approach balancing the need for accountability with the recognition of systematic barriers that impact youth involvement in the justice system?
I think from what with my experience, the way you mean how I approach the children when I'm working
Yeah,
with them?
yeah, it could be the children, the professionals.
So with where I am currently, I so where I am currently at my workplace, I have a lot of interventions that are linked to some of the kids that were involved or in the youth justice service. So what I've done is my experience has allowed me to bring that over to where I am currently. and I'm able to use them with these kids. So as an example, so my role right now, every day, every day is different. Every day is very different. I can't really plan my days. I've had to learn to really be very structured with the way certain things are. I.e., if I'm meeting parents, that I can plan, and other things or meetings I can plan. But in terms of what's going to happen with the kids, I can't plan that. I can't plan it. But what happens is, say for example, there was a fight. Two or one of them will get brought to me, and I would have to find out what's going on. So I'll get them to give me their account of what happened and why they believe that they've been brought to me. And then after that, what I would do is I would do one-to-one interventions with them. So one of the interventions will be called offending behavior. So offending behavior will basically look at them, what they've done, and it being an offense. And also, if that was out on the street, they will get arrested for that. So it's about me tapping in and letting them know that, yes, what your behavior is in here is different. But if it was out on the street, you would definitely get arrested for that. Somebody would call the police on you. So it's about them realizing the consequences of their behavior. And it's a bit about what you kind of said earlier on about planting seeds. So when they get brought to me for whatever reason, it could be just, yeah, for any crazy reason, I have to now dissect and look at the root of their behavior. And I need to ask them why, constantly why, until they get the answer themselves. And with that, I'm now able to manage how we're going to get over this moving forward. So 9 times out of 10, I'll give you a little bit of. So someone gets brought to me for fighting, and then I would say to Tim, okay, so why do you think you've been brought to me? I don't know, miss. I had a fight with so and so. Okay, why did you have a fight? Don't know, miss. He was giving me verbal. He was talking back to me, and I didn't like it. So then my next thing to that would be is right. So you know that you've put yourself in a very tricky situation because your college could be at risk. Your college place could be at risk because we don't condone violence. But depending on the circumstances and the factors around that child, we will then consider suspending them or not, or just permanently excluded them. So I'll get them to reflect on his behavior, and then it will go deeper and deeper. So then the next thing, it will then change to, what's your home life like? I need you to tell me about what's your home life like? What's your environment like? And then I want them to make the connection themselves, and 9 times out of 10 they do make the connections. Oh, it was because of my dad. My dad's not around anymore, so I've realized since my dad's not been around anymore, my anger issues are really bad, and this and that. So with all of this information now, I'm able to do a really good intervention with the child. So at the college where I am currently, we've got a lot of different support, which is absolutely amazing. Then that's when I can do my referrals to counselling. I can do my referrals to the safeguarding team. I can do my referrals to the careers team, because sometimes college isn't what they wanted or what they expected. I can also, refer them to the sports team where they can join a sport or they can go to the gym. There's all of this, but it's about them trusting me enough to be open and honest and say, Azi, this is what the issue is. And this is why I keep getting into these kind of situations.
How do you navigate the complexities and challenges of advocating for change within the school to prison pipeline?
So I would have regular meetings with my manager, who's a vice principal, and I literally just air out everything to her, because with this line of work, with the kind of children that we work with or slash students, you've got to be transparent. You have to be really transparent, and I think because of my background as well, you coming from youth justice service, I've seen what can happen. I've seen like where a child was an excelling student, was doing really, really well for himself. Was going to school every day, and then COVID hit, and then certain circumstances happened. And then that now led that child to just start hanging around with the wrong kind of people. and that then led that child to not give a damn about school because it's like, but my home life isn't right, so why should I care? And I think that's something I always carry within me. Like, as much as some of these children can be quite hard to work with, but so can adults. The only difference is age. But I always advocate. I will always do my best to advocate because I remember that could have been me when I was younger. I could have easily gone down the wrong path. I think that's what it is that keeps me advocating, and as well as providing training for members of staff as well.
What role do you believe empathy and understanding plays in your work with young people, particularly with those at risk of ending up in that pipeline?
I think it plays a huge role. I mean, because if I wanted to, I mean, if I look at the grand scheme of things, if I wanted to, in my position, it's easy for me to suspend a child. But again, because of my path and my upbringing and what I went through when I was a child myself, I will always have that empathy. But I think when I work with all these children, young people, young adults, I always say to them, like, I always set boundaries. You have to set boundaries with them, because if it's the same thing, you have to set boundaries with adults. If you don't do that, they will keep crossing them. And I've like I said, I remember I said earlier on, I didn't grow up having boundaries because of certain things I saw. So I was more of like a people pleaser growing up. I didn't want to rock the boat. I was scared of conflict. And as I've got older, conflict is not a bad thing. Setting boundaries is not a bad thing. It's for your peace of mind, and it's for your mental health. So it's like with these kids, when they first meet me in any kind of environment I'm in, any kind of line of work that I'm in, I've learned that setting boundaries, you have to, because if you don't, they will take the mick, and they will continue to do it. So it's about having this very, maybe for some it's uncomfortable, but for the way I look at it is, it's a very honest conversation. You have to have that honest conversation, because then you can go back and say, listen, do you remember the time when we had this conversation and you said you weren't going to do this and you decided to do this? It's, oh yeah, you remember? Of course I remember. It's about setting boundaries, healthy boundaries. But empathy plays such a big part, because there's only so much that they can keep doing. Say, for example, someone's having, like, I don't know, 6, 7 fights a week. There's a problem. Not to say that there isn't a problem if it's less, but there is a problem there. So is our environment, or is the organization right for that child? No, it clearly isn't. So what do we as professionals need to do to ensure that this child is in the right environment to thrive? It's about having these honest conversations and ensuring that you are on the right page with other professionals, because sometimes you're not. And sometimes they just want you to get rid of that child, but it's difficult because this child has so many other things going on. But I think it's just about being open and honest, as well as having empathy and understanding. Because that could be any of our kids. That could be my brother. That could have been my brother when we were younger. That could have been my sister. That could have been my neighbor across the road. I think it's until it happens to you directly, then I think a lot of people have empathy for that. Until it doesn't happen to them, it's just the way the world works to an extent. Until something deeply happens to you, then you decide, you change your perspective. Yeah, I think that's the best way for me to put it.
Yeah, that's true. I think it even goes back to the line of work like you do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know the line of work that I do heavily involves, you know, children and young people because of the experiences that I've had as a care leaver, the youth justice system, whatever it may be, because of my personal experience. There's something I get out of it and something other people get out of it because this is my passion. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, yeah, you're right. Nobody's going to understand until they're or empathize with someone until they're in the same position or similar. Um, and yeah, it just doesn't come naturally, I feel like, to some human beings, quite a few
No,
human.
I
Um,
agree.
and there's such a negative view around them, like, different groups of people or anything like that, because of what they've gone through. Um, you just don't know them, to make those views. Or but that lack of empathy is what's really concerning. How can you,
Mm,
yeah, and it's like it's so sad. It's gone to the way that reality is. It's always been that way. I don't know why I said it's gone to, but the reality is that you have to um go through something to feel empathy because that's often the case. And know, being empathetic is quite time consuming sometimes.
mhm,
It's very short
mm,
to give. It's like I'm so sorry that you've gone through that must be difficult. I don't know. One thing I know people find difficult for a variety of different reasons, but one thing I say, if I'm autistic and I can do it, okay,
mm,
you
mhm,
know, is you might not, how do I say this? You might not feel empathy, but there's great ways of validating someone's feelings that
mhm, mhm,
close to empathy. If that makes sense. I don't know,
mhm.
maybe.
No, no, no,
Um,
you're right. I agree. I agree with what you're saying.
there's little simple. One thing I feel like we both can relate, you being a black person, I'm being an Asian person, is cultural competency and
Mm,
inclusion.
mhm.
How do you ensure that your advocacy, efforts are inclusive and culturally responsive, particularly in addressing the disproportionate impact of the justice system on marginalized communities?
It plays a big role, you know. I mean, I think again that probably stems from upbringing, being brought up in a household where racism was not tolerated at all. But it was a thing where my parents' family has always been open to all kinds of races. And what helped as well is because I'm not from London originally, I'm from Luton. So I grew up in a community where there was a lot of Asian people and also the likes of Tommy Robinson as well. He's from Luton, and going to school with someone like that, it wasn't quite nice. So I was around racism a lot, but I think just seeing how it just divides people and me not wanting to be part of that, and me growing up and me being involved in the kind of line of work that I do, I know that kids will see things and I will challenge a lot of what they do say when it comes to race, religion. I have to challenge it because you can't be thinking in that kind of manner because you are offending people. And if you're offending people, they're more likely to exclude you. So I think that's just how it's about planting seeds. They may not get it today, but eventually they will. So it's about planting seeds and always just saying, "Look, you can't be like this." It does play a huge part. It does, because the thing is, when they leave college, or if they want to get a part-time job, they're going to be faced with so many different people from all walks of life, different faiths. So it's about us where we currently are installing these, little seeds in them, so that when they do get out there, it's something that they're really used to, and They have to be respectful because their boss could be someone completely opposite to who they're used to. Then what are they going to do in that position? Are they going to be, make that their boss feel uncomfortable because they're not used to it? It doesn't even make any sense. So yeah, it's a very honest conversation I have with my students all the time.
Yeah. And it's important. I feel like the thing that like often young people are so frustrated about is the lack of transparency, the lack of
Mm,
honesty. I
yeah.
don't think it's a lack of honesty. I think it's more of a lack of transparency.
Hmm.
Um, and there's sometimes a lack of honesty, but I feel like that's so important because people
Hmm.
either like try to like hide things from young people, thinking that they don't know or won't know. They will know, like or sometimes it's just like this is this and this is that, you know.
Hmm.
Like sometimes I feel like often people expect young people because they're like teenagers or whatever to automatically know what they're doing is wrong,
Yeah.
and that's they don't. It was like it takes a lot of like sometimes a lot of life experience or a lot of like putting two and two together, which they are unable to do.
Hmm.
Like I remember, like yeah, but no, I'm not gonna say that.
You don't want to
No,
say it?
let
I
me
think you
think.
should.
Okay, so I think it was when I was 17, what I
Hmm.
would do when I was really upset was instead of hurting other people, I write their names and put them in the oven
Okay.
on paper. Anyway, that was really fucked up, but I did that. And I was like, and everybody would react so big to it. I'm like, I could be hurting you right now. Like, I don't understand.
Mm,
And then one day, my therapist came to my house instead of me going to see her because, it was one of those, it was one of, we didn't do that often. But anyway, besides the story, I did it while she was there because something made me really angry. But her name wasn't on it. She was absolutely lovely. And, and she was like, if you put paper in the oven, it's going to catch on fire. I
mm,
didn't know that. I thought, parchment paper goes in the oven, nothing happens. So what's the difference if I put paper in the oven?
mhm, mhm.
Nobody's told me. Everybody's reacting, but
No
nobody's taking
one's,
the time to
yeah.
explain that if you put regular paper in the oven, it is going to catch on fire. The house will
Mhm,
burn down. That's the
mhm,
worst case scenario,
mhm,
and
mhm.
people will die from it. Like nobody's taking the time. And I think that's so important. And,
It is.
sometimes people prefer a much more direct approach. This is how it is. Some people prefer a softer approach. Whatever, get the message across, but you need to explain why
Mhm,
you're reacting a certain way. It's like, I remember when I was working with a young person, um, they hurt somebody and they just didn't understand why people were upset. And it's like, well, it will cause, because they had a very high pain threshold.
mhm,
If they did the exact same force to them, it doesn't really affect them like physically. There's no pain, nothing like that. But for other people, I needed to explain that there's lower pain thresholds. It will
mhm,
hurt, and and whilst it's hurting, it's quite painful and sometimes unbearable.
mhm,
Nobody's taking the time, like and that person, and that's like that person was 16, and you might think, oh, they're 16, and they're quite like they're old enough to understand. But when they have special educational needs,
yes,
it's not
definitely.
as transparent as that.
Yeah.
There's so many factors that come into play which people fail to consider. And there are a lot of factors, complex needs are complex for a reason,
Mhm,
but
absolutely.
it's just that little time and effort, I feel
Hmm.
like, just does wonders. From that day onwards, I did not put, by the way, I just want to clarify, I didn't put paper in the oven. But
No
yeah,
judgment, no judgment out here at all. I mean, no judgment. This is the thing. Like when you're younger, you just do things because sometimes, like what you say, you haven't been told the right way of how to do it, and all it takes is for that one person to ask you why, or do you
mm,
know this is what's going to happen, and then before you know it, you're not doing it anymore, or you've replaced it with something else. So no
absolutely.
judgment.
Like, for those who are listening, just to see. And the thing is, yeah, I think so many things can be, to a certain level though, can be sorted out within a conversation.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
people just rush to consequences. The consequences aren't always the solution, and we'll come to
Mhm.
that. What role do punitive disciplinary measures such as suspensions, expulsions, and arrests play in fueling the school to prison pipeline? And how do these disproportionately impact marginalised students?
It plays such a huge part. Like I said to you earlier on about the school to prison pipeline, with it solely being, you know, ethnic boys, more specifically boys, Black and Asian boys, more like 3 to 4 times more likely to get permanently excluded from mainstream education. So that's a really big factor in itself. And also, according to the Ministry of Justice, they actually published out a research paper and a report that actually states a Black or Asian young male is 20 times more likely to end up in jail. So it's the same numbers again. Well, it's even worse this time because it's gone from permanently excluded,
Mm.
and then now we're looking at jail. So the figures are on a rise, and you can clearly see that with these numbers, something is not right. What is going on, and why is it that a lot of Black boys or Asian boys are more likely to get permanently excluded or end up in jail? What is it? And it just stems from, is it lack of chances? Is it the fact that they've not been given, a fair opportunity compared to their white counterpart? Is it because of the way they portray themselves in schools or in environments? Was it because they're more likely to end up in crime? I can't give you one answer for that, but what I can say is there are so many there's so many answers, and we can sit here all day going, round and round and round. There's so many different answers, but what I would say is that the figures speak for itself. 3 to 4 times more likely to get permanently excluded if you're Black or Asian young boy, and you are 20 times more likely to end up in jail if you're Black or Asian young male. So what the odds? The odds are against them. I think specifically, this is us looking in London. The odds are against them to an extent. Because if we want to take it even more further, the police are 10 times more likely to stop and search a Black boy and an Asian boy. Stop and search. But then you could turn on and say, but then when they are stopping and searching these young boys, aren't they finding stuff on them? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But compared to their white counterpart, they are definitely more likely to get stopped and searched. So this already is installed in them from when they're young. They're already discriminated against from the moment they are born. I know it sounds pretty harsh, but this is the reality of it. From the moment they're born, the moment they come out from their mother's womb, they're already discriminated against. So for me is, I don't want to answer that question in a negative way, but what I do is when I and other colleagues that I work with, not just in my current line of work, but outside as well, that I'm really, really good friends is, what we do is we flip the script and we say to these kids, with them knowing this, because we will break this down to them. Why do they need to be another statistic? Why do they need to go down that path when they can do so much better, when they've got other opportunities? And this is where, when it comes to the empathy, the understanding, and the intensive intervention, that's why it works, because it's consistent. We're trying to deter them away from that, because I don't want another, even though I know that previous young people I've worked with are either in jail or have been arrested or have been permanently excluded from education. I just try not to really think about it because it makes me sad.
I think it's also really difficult when you have very hopes and dreams for them, and it goes the other way, and there's nothing you can really do at that point.
Yeah, I think I'll give you like a little a summary of me when I worked with this child, and the story still sticks with me to this day because I hope he's okay. But I had to work with him because he got arrested for possession of an offensive weapon, so for carrying a knife in a public place. So I went to his house. So we would do, when you work within the Youth Justice Service, it's advisable to do home visits because it gives you an insight into their environment and where they're living and what they're getting up to. So I went into his home, and then mum was suffering from mental health. Mum couldn't read and write, and he's just there, just in the house. Doesn't want to go to school anymore. Mum's not feeding. Well, it's not that mum was not feeding him. He wasn't eating his 3 meals a day either because mum's not well. Mum's really, really unwell, and the home environment wasn't great either. It was quite bad, and it's really badly unkept. So this child has a social worker. This child would have the youth justice worker that would go around there as well, and myself. The child needed 2, so myself and the other worker. So when we would go there, it was it wasn't a livable condition. It's not somewhere that you'd want to live. And even if you lived in that kind of environment, how are you supposed to thrive? So you've got all of this going on. And not only that, the local authority then decided to fine the mum because the child wasn't going to school. But the issue with that is the mum didn't know how to read and write the papers. So it's bigger than what it is. It's not just this, oh, the child has been defiant. In this case anyway, the child's been defiant. There is other issues that the mum needs help with that the mum isn't getting. And that is now spilling into the child's life. So with all of that, what hope does that child have? And this is that like I said, that story always, you will always have that one story or one thing that will just stick to you or make your heart turn. That is the story that just really gets to me, because with that, where I hope he's doing fine now, but with a circumstance like that, you have a lot of kids in those kind of positions where their home is unkept, the mum can't read and write, mum or dad is suffering from mental health. At the bottom of where they live like in an estate. There's a lot of gang activity going on in there. There's a lot of crime going on there. So obviously the child's going to join in on that. The child is going to take part in that because the child doesn't have a father in place either. The child's dad's not around. So what hope does that child have? And I'm not saying I condone gangs and violence and stuff, but as a professional, what hope does that child have?
It's
It's
the
quite sad.
vibe of the book, really, isn't it? It's yeah.
It's sad. It is sad. And the child was only 13.
Mm.
And he hasn't even lived yet. He hasn't even lived yet. He's only 13. I think now he's about 15, I think now. But at such a young age, because the reality is when he was, I'm kind of going off on a rant now, but when he was
Okay.
going to school, his peers in school were laughing at him because his clothes were unkept. Because his mum's not able to wash his clothes. And again, that's not me excusing anyone's behavior, but this is the reality of a lot of these things and where what these kids are going through. So
Mm.
when they're being bullied at school, or I don't know if the school decided to help or not, I don't know. I wasn't on the case for that long, but they were trying to push for that child to come to school. Okay, yeah, the child comes to school, then what? The child is in school, now what? They've got a million and other things on their mind. So how are they supposed to focus? How? How do you expect a child like that to focus and get their work done and submit their work on time? Or when they're at home, how do you expect them to find a quiet place and do their homework? They don't have that. So that story does hit me raw all the time. Every time I think about it, it does hit me raw. And I think that's just why when I work with kids, I always have that at the back of my mind, because I don't want them to end up like that. Not to say they are going to, but that is always at the back of my mind. Even even me speaking to you about it now is bringing up raw emotions.
How do you differentiate between a direct and indirect pathway within the school to prison pipeline, and how do they intersect to perpetuate cycles of incarceration?
I would say with my role, because my role is quite where I am currently, it's quite vital, and I do, because I'm head of behaviour and intervention, it does play a huge part in that. And the way our college operates, and this is this is what I really love about the colleges. We actually do give these children a lot of chances. So it's like when things happen, from the fights to bullying and further issues, what we will do is we will have a conversation with them. We'll get the parents to come in. We will refer them to the services in house as well as externally if need be. We will also get them to, or support them to, apply to another institution, because we are trying to prevent that from happening. It's all well and good. Yes, some people be like, oh, you can just call the police, call the police. But again, with what I know and with what my colleagues know, sometimes that doesn't work. It just makes things worse for them. And a lot of the times, we are actually protecting them to a certain extent. But they obviously wouldn't realize that only until they get older that they will. But it's about whenever I want to make a decision or I think a decision needs to be made, it's about me having the open and honest conversation with all my colleagues that work with this child or getting a bit of a summary. I think that's the best way I can put that.
What do you think about, zero tolerance policies? How do zero tolerance policies, you know, contribute to criminalization of minor infractions within school settings, particularly for the students who are, you know, um, marginalized in terms of race and disabilities and stuff like
I think the zero tolerance policies are the worst because it's how can you say how can if you when you actually break it down, zero tolerance, what does that even mean? For a child, and you're just making the system more rigid because you're not really allowing them to make a mistake up to an extent. Like nobody's perfect. And this is the thing that I've noticed about professionals. It's all well and good. Now that we're adults, we can have our say because we were never wrong. We were always all innocent. We were always on a straight and narrow. No, we weren't. And we have to take that into consideration. I think it's really important when we're dealing with zero tolerance policies. I'm not a fan of them at all. And again, this is probably why, to an extent, we're in a situation of school to prison pipeline because it was so rigid back then. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was Margaret Thatcher that actually brought out that policy. I think she brought it up. I think she brought that out in is it the 1970s or 80s, between the late 70s or the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And it caused a huge ruckus. Again, it was aimed at a certain community or aimed at a certain group of people, and it just didn't do any help. It didn't do any justice for them whatsoever. It didn't. So personally, I'm not a fan of them, and I would say from what you've asked me, I would say us as professionals and adults really do need to reflect on ourselves a lot more when it comes to engaging or working with young people. Definitely.
that. Yeah, because you're right. Because I think about that when the in the way that when I see other people interacting with other people who are professionals interacting with other people, the way they say things, the way they not articulate. Yeah, I guess it's articulating. When you speak to certain people, you need to articulate in a certain way what you want to
Mm,
say. Way in the way that you do that, I can tell you're setting this person up to fail. You do not care.
mhm.
Everything, I feel like it all starts with something very, very simple, and that's how it's going to escalate. And that's always the case. You're setting this up to fail. The way you speak to, I don't know, a white counterpart to someone who's black or Asian is going to be completely different.
Absolutely.
And, and you think you're subtle, but you really are not.
No.
It's like, and I look at them and I'm like, and yeah, everybody acts like they don't have a past. It's
Yes, they
like
sure do.
you're telling me, like, trust me, if you were this perfect child that you said you were, I'm sure you have a Guinness World Record, like, you know, thing by now. Do you know what I mean? Like, nothing, no trouble, no, nothing. And I'm like, who are you lying to? And the thing is, right, I feel like if, and you know what, like, yeah, I don't know what to say. It's just, for me, I just find it disgusting. I'm like, but I remember when I was a young person, I would be like, do not talk to me that way. I would say it much, I would be like, don't talk to me like that way. Like, some of my child or whatever. I am a child, but don't talk to me like I'm an infant. I'm able
Mm,
to grasp those concepts that you're talking about. And if I'm not, you explain it to me like what my intellectual age is.
mhm,
I'm not an infant. You can just tell it to me as it is.
mhm.
You know, I don't like, for example, I don't appreciate when people, it just doesn't work with me, but I think it's still the case when people speak to me in a very harsh tone.
Mhm.
because I feel like I'm in trouble, and I'm like, and that's what my mind is going. But like, you can say what you want to say, and it'll still go in my head. It's more likely to go in my head if
Hmm.
you speak in a softer manner, not in an
Hmm.
infant manner,
Yeah, no.
harsher manner, but just that, And for some people, a harsher manner does work, and
Yeah, it does. It does. It does.
and what you just need to see what works for each people. Some people prefer a very direct approach, some people don't, and
Mm,
what goes in. I remember, like, I think often people feel really bad about um the way that people pass are, because you can tell in the way that they speak to you.
hmm.
And again, it's like that sort of treatment that, you feel bad for me, that's great, but you need to treat me like a regular person.
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe a trauma informed approach, but not making it obvious like, okay, babe, I'm not your babe, but like,
No, no,
like
you're right. You're right. You're right. Not like a baby or anything like that, because it does.
yeah.
You're right, because it even with where I am now, a lot of the kids will say, "Oh, but Miss so and so." Sometimes it's very strange because some of them will call me Miss, or some of them just call me Azzy. But I don't mind. I don't mind. I just find it quite interesting because obviously, not obviously, but in college, you just call the teachers or staff by their names. But I find that quite interesting. But it would just be, oh, so and so was talking to me and like I was a baby. I don't like it, and it's like, are you sure? Is that how you feel? Why do you think they're talking to you like that? And then again, after that, it's just about if it's done twice, two more times, whatever. I would then have a conversation with the member of staff just to see how things are between him and that, or her and that student.
Mm,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is because I don't like it myself. I don't like it when I'm out and about, or if someone was coming to me and say, "Hi, do you have?" I'll just be like, "Kid, I'm an
What do you
adult."
want?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah, exactly,
Um,
exactly. What do you want? What is going on
yeah.
here?
And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not as naive as you think. I feel like sometimes people get that impression. Like,
Mm,
at times I can have my, I don't, yeah, I don't like, I can put my head down and work and I seem really, really high functioning, but they see me like, when I'm like, really, really struggling. That's another thing that I hate. I feel like I'm really digressing. I should have taken my medication this morning, but like high functioning and low functioning, I hate those terms. I feel like
oh
that's a
yeah,
double
high functioning, low
root
functioning.
to
Yeah,
fail. Like
yeah.
people, I don't know. Like I'm like this most of the time, right? But this is not to you directly, but to everyone who's listening to you, whatever. I'm like this most of the time. Currently, I'm on a 2-to-1, 24/7. Where I
Okay.
live, where if I go to work, sometimes they'll come with me, sometimes they don't. 24/7, there's people. I used to be on a 5-to-1 2 years ago. Not
Oh,
even that.
really?
Yeah, I used to be on
How
five.
comes it
And
dropped? How comes it dropped
we had
down?
support workers. I had 4 registered mental health nurses
Hmm.
with me and a support worker. So 5 people. And people don't
Hmm.
see that because they see this side and they don't see the
That's
side
right.
that's those two can coexist within one.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's so, difficult for people to navigate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No,
So
you're right. Do you not see? Sorry, I want to ask you a question, Royce, if that's okay. Do you
yeah,
not? Do you? How do you see it now with the five to? So it was five before. Then you said, is it two?
two.
Do you feel like
Yeah.
there's a huge difference, or do you feel like you did something in order for that to change?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think there was a huge difference in my behavior. Honestly, I
Okay.
don't. I feel like my needs were met more, so my responses are much more appropriate to my situation.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
simple as that, really.
Hmm.
I'm currently, it's a bit of a weird situation. I do have, like, with my autism, my ADHD, that's going to be lifelong. That's not something I can get rid of or control in any way. I can manage it, but I can't control it. So that will affect me every day in the way I respond, my emotional
Hmm.
regulation, stuff like that. My personality disorder, so I have emotional personality disorder and my complex PTSD, that's going to interact, they all interact with each other so differently, it will cause
Hmm.
different responses. There are times where I can be, not without reason, but I can be, very physical sometimes. I can be verbal sometimes. But I don't. I feel like people, what they do is they try to risk manage, but risk manage is
Mhm,
not the solution.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Is adapting that environment, adapting the people
Yeah.
around you to better meet your needs, like you
Mhm.
do in education, right? If this
Yeah.
child is not right for that school or that college, probably not the right environment or the right support they're receiving.
Yeah. It's true.
And it's not always to blame the school,
No.
just not a fit.
No, it's not. You can't force it.
Absolutely. And people are like, they say to young people, yeah, did I answer your question?
No, we were just going off on a.
Oh, sorry, what was the question again?
Oh,
No, I did
I
not.
asked. No, I just basically said to you about is have you did you feel like you did something different in terms of because you said you had about five work
I think I
jot
learnt to
down.
mask things more. I don't, a high ratio is never the answer. I feel like two very highly trained people can manage no matter how big the risk is, at most three. Once you go beyond that, you're just protecting yourself and your organization, and that's it. There's nothing that's changed in the way that I am. My mental health has probably deteriorated more. My
Okay.
neurodivergence is probably much more obvious. Um, but it's the masking. I mask much more, which
Okay.
suppresses everything. Nothing has changed. I think you just need to know how to play the system, really.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. I agree.
I think when people go on a high ratio, what happens is I feel like school does this. Sometimes people in the criminal justice system, if you end up, they might too much to handle. But no, you just need to find it or adapt the environment to suit them.
Hmm.
That's contingency plan is that short term until you find something long term.
No, I agree. I
Like
agree.
it's just you just protect. I feel like when you go to such a high ratio, you feel more overwhelmed. You're more likely to get distressed, especially if you're neurodivergent,
Hmm.
and things become very, very difficult. And people are even, and that stuff is going to follow me to my adulthood. Right now, my liberty is being deprived illegally. I'm still working on it. It's been deprived illegally for the last year and 3 months, 4 months. So it's always constant battle, but it's never the solution. I never do think, and I don't think anything would change in a person's behavior. It will
Hmm.
escalate until they learn how to mask it and hide it.
Hmm.
And that's just a reality. So yeah, no, nothing changes.
Okay.
In the way that you respond will be much more internalized,
Okay.
and then you're still suffering, but not to the way anybody else can notice.
But
So
only you
I work
notice.
in a room. I don't leave the house unless I'm at work. I'm going to work or a
Hmm.
medical appointment, which I now do online. So I'm in my room 24/7, pretty much.
Okay. Okay.
So you've before I used to be out, like not out and about, but like out in different parts of the house, but now not. So there's like different changes, and yeah, they
Mhm.
affect you much more drastically. And you get like school regression and stuff like that. I feel like I went on a tangent, but hopefully I answered your question. No, it
No,
doesn't
no, no, you
work.
did. No, 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 you're not going off on a tangent at all. No, you're just making me have a better understanding of you. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
okay. But yeah, I feel like when you, and I think that's so important when, going to that school to prison pipeline again, that the way
Mm,
that people write about children and young people will stick to them the rest of their lives or until they're
yeah,
in the system. Um, and, it will lead to skill regression, not being able to have a job, benefits, great
yeah.
service, but it doesn't pay enough,
No, absolutely. It
especially
does.
with the
It
disability
yeah.
tax. So I need to go out for work, not complaining about that, but if I go out to work, then having two people follow me around if I need to go. Does that make sense? Or my liberty being deprived legally or appointments. And it becomes very, very expensive.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like with a higher ratio, people are much more likely to I've noticed to end up in the prison pipeline. Schools prison pipeline. But like even the way that my EHCP was written, right, it explained how I can be at my worst.
Okay.
And every school in London got a referral. Any school that was suitable for me. That's so. I think that was 100 schools that special educational schools. London and a bit out of London, but still travelable. So I'd be able to travel to over 100 schools, um, and only one came back to me.
Oh wow.
And I went to that school, and I did what they asked me to do. It was like these taster days, did everything, and they were like, "We don't think we have multiple provisions, but we don't think this is suitable for me, like for you, because You don't need a one-to-one. I need a one-to-one. You know, like that's what works best for me. That's why I'm thriving so
Mm-hmm.
well. But obviously, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have. I heard that from somebody else, and I also couldn't articulate that in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, they get a few days back, and it's just like, oh, and they were thinking like the school who don't even know me. I've really been there for like one, then two taster days, like two different provisions. You don't need to be in a special education provision. You have not seen me when I needed,
Yeah,
needed.
they're just going off you at that moment in time, which is
Yeah,
wrong. It's wrong.
yeah. I'm like, do you? I want to go to school so badly because I thrive in. I don't. I can thrive in a good school. I enjoy school, which is quite rare. I think that's the Asian in me. I really like value education.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I always will value. To a certain age, I think. But there's also life anyway. But you also don't. So what the person would do to get into a school? And every school has not either not got back to me, but have read my referral,
Oh wow.
or read my referral, or rejected me, and that's 100 schools. So that says a lot. And I'm like,
It
you've
is.
not given me a chance. And one time, this person came to me where I lived. But yeah, and then I did get a school placement, and then I couldn't go because it got, I think it was adequate. I looked
Oh,
after children, all children in care can only go to good or outstanding schools to actually give them an opportunity to thrive.
oh wow. Well, only good
Yeah.
or outstanding. Does that still stand today?
I'm not sure about all local authorities, but the local authority in Merton, that's what they do. So a child can't
Wow.
go below a good if they're a child in care. And all of them, most most I think it was 89%. I'm not sure. I have to check. But the last time I heard, 89% of people are in education and engaged in education in some way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you have another barrier, you don't need like requires improvement or adequate school. Sometimes
Mm.
give them an opportunity to grow.
Oh
But yeah,
wow.
like even when education didn't work out for me, like a formal setting, I tuition. So I've not been in.
Mm.
I still do that. I'm doing tuitions or education. Like they call it tuition. I call it tuition. Nobody else called it that. To actually do home education or online education, or like somebody comes over to you, so you're still not missing out on anything.
Yeah.
I'm still doing that. I should be in university right now, but I'm a year behind, 2 years behind, a year behind, something like that, because I've been in and out of hospital, all that sort of stuff, moving around a lot, and I'm actually further along in the curriculum than people in mainstream education.
Wow. See, that just
When you
speak volumes then.
when you have the opportunity, when the environment is suited for you and the person that you're working with is suited for you, then you thrive. Another thing I would like to bring, I feel like I'm going on a tangent. Should have taken the medication, but like when people, one thing that people, staff and professionals do say is you get to pick and choose who you want to work with, and I'm like, yeah, I pick and choose who I want to work with. If you go to work, you pick and choose who you rather work with. There's times where
It's true.
I'm not going to be like, so Azzy, if I didn't get along with you, but our manager said we have to work together, I can be civil with you, but it doesn't mean I have to be like, oh hi, how's your day, how's your children, how's your whatever, how's your donkey,
Yeah, it's true.
no, I can be civil, get the work done, and then move on. I can do that. But also in your personal life, you cultivate who you want a relationship with because you know
Mhm,
where they stand with you know their values, and you know how they are. So
mhm.
there's no need to be fake. There's no need for that. But you pick and choose.
Yeah, no, you do. You do
Because
pick and
I do
choose.
that in a professional relationship, which most of my relationships in my life are, it doesn't really make a difference to me. This
Mhm.
is very this. If you can do this in your personal and professional life, why can't I do it in my own personal life where I have professionals working with me?
Absolutely. And as
Absolutely.
you should, you should. If that's your choice, that's your choice.
Exactly. As long as I'm civil to them and not rude,
Exactly.
there's no issue. I can pick and choose who I work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, and then I feel like this is what people also have an issue with when you go bringing back to the school thing. Is like when young people prefer an adult. Sometimes they're not available, understandable,
Yeah.
or sometimes there's other reasons why they're not available. When they interact with them like during the break or whatever, it's like, oh, she's being nice to only her again or only him again. No, but that person has built that relationship,
It
cultivated
does,
it.
yeah.
It doesn't just come up
No.
like, here's a person. Like there was what the last placement that I was at, amazing. It was like a lovely. It was, I would have called it home, one of my homes. The guy, he's the chief executive of the place. I hated him originally. I hated him so much. Just the look of him annoyed me. Just the look of him. Nothing else. Just the look of him. He's just a very irritating person. But within a week, I loved him. Like couldn't get
Okay.
away with him. I was like, you know what? Let's watch a film together. Let's do this. Let's do that. You want to go for a walk together? Hated walks, don't know why, but do you want to go out for a walk? Because you cultivate that relationship, the way you
Yeah.
interact with people, you understand people. Whole
So
different
wait,
thing.
so you hated walks, but you would go out on a walk with him.
Yeah. I've only
Yeah,
done
see,
it like
that's positive.
twice, but like yeah, I would make the effort. You like walks, you like to go to the gym, but you don't have time for the gym. I don't like walks, but I want to spend time with you. Let's do this
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that is a positive.
Yeah.
That
And
is a
it's
real big positive.
if you take time to if you can if you have patience, it creates understanding, which will create good relationships. That's it.
Hmm.
That's a
No,
very
it's
simple.
true. It will. It will.
Yeah.
It really will.
Let's go back to racism and like properly address that. Um, I think that's such an important topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in what ways does institutionalized racism manifest within school to prison pipeline, from biased disciplinary practices to racial disparities in access to educational resources and opportunities?
Oh my gosh, it has such a huge impact. There was I'll just give you a bit of background. So there was a time where I was working with one of my colleagues, and she told me where she used to work before that basically she was doing like mentoring work with a group of black boys. There was four. She was brought in to just manage their behavior in the school. And as time went by, things were really, really looking up for these boys. They were doing really well. They loved the sessions. And then they were known already for their negative behavior. And then there was a time when it was their last session with her. And, they were in real high spirit, really, really happy. And as they were leaving the classroom, they're walking in the corridor. And in the corridor in the school, the doors that when you push them, they go out, they open up outwards. And so these four boys, and she was behind them, they was walking down the corridor. And then on the other side of the door was a member of staff who was white. And as the boys have gone to push open the door has accidentally hit her. And then the boys were like, "Oh, miss, we're sorry, we're sorry." And then she was like, "No, you did this on purpose. You did this on purpose." And then the head teacher from across the corridor saw the whole thing and was basically like, "I saw the whole thing. Um, you guys did this on purpose, and it's not good. We're gonna have to have a meeting with your parents because we can't have you back in the school." And my colleague is trying to advocate for them and say, like, "Look, I was behind them. I saw that they didn't do it on purpose." And the teacher that got hit by accident was like, "No, they did it on purpose." Long and short of it is, they then, I think a couple of days went by, and then it was my colleague's time to leave anyway. So she'd already left. She wasn't able to advocate for the boys anymore. And their parents got brought in. And then the long and short of it is they got permanently excluded. They got permanently excluded for that. And the obvious thing here is if there were white boys, that would have been a complete different scenario. But the fact that they were black, they were in year 11, they were about to sit their GCSEs, that's their whole future just gone, just like that. And it's sad because the other head teacher did not get along with any of those boys, and he made it his personal mission to get rid of them. So, going back to the question you've asked, it plays a huge part. I think if with some people, it's probably what they've experienced themselves. I think it's what they think they know, but they don't really know. And it's just that can hinder, especially as a child. I don't know where they are right now. I don't know what path they're on. Hopefully, it's a good path. But that story in itself, again, is another story that sits with me. If it was four white boys, like I said, their outcome could have been completely different. But it was the fact that they already had a negative relationship with the head teacher and that teacher. And there was no like leeway. There was no there was no understanding. There was no like, oh yeah, it was an accident. It was straight. They did it on purpose. They knew what they were doing, and it's wrong. And yeah, it is wrong. It is completely wrong. So I think it does play. We all have our own biases. I think because of my line of work and the amount of training that we have to have, where there is a constant refresher for it, there was a constant reminder of you can't be like this, you can't project your own views, negative views on other people. Because I always say, that in every single race and religion, that you're going to get good and bad people all the time. But you can't now use like the same brush to paint every single black person or Asian person or white person the same. Like what I shared with you earlier on, with me going to school with Tommy Robinson and him making, my life a living hell, with other people. He was allowed to get away with that for such a long time, hence why today he was able to have an organization called the English Defence League. It's me knowing that and my upbringing, I don't go around painting the same white, all white people the same brush. So it's just with things like that. And I think with my experience helps. And because I work with kids, is I have to remind myself that not every kid, white kid or black kid or Asian kid, is going to be exactly the same. Because it's not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, and it's like, and what you told me about those, group of boys, what they try to do, they try to find any small excuse to
Yeah, they
kick them
did.
out.
They did.
And it's absolutely, I feel like, there's so much disparity and nobody wants to admit it. Like people in positional power, they were like, oh, black boys are like this, Asian boys are like this, Asian, this is the statistics. What are you going to do about the statistics? It's great that they're there, great so we can get a visual image, but just having that is not going to do anything.
No, it doesn't.
It's, yeah, it's like finding out that you have cancer but you're not going for chemotherapy, you're not given like chemotherapy as a treatment. Like,
exactly that.
what are you doing? And there's not enough special education provisions. That includes PRUs, that includes alternative provisions, home education, whatever it is. These are basic human things these children need to do. You're not setting them up to succeed. It's setting them up to fail. But you want to bring up these reports, say, to make yourself seem inclusive, as whatever political party or whatever, education ministry or whatever it is. There needs to be more done. There needs to be actionable steps. One thing, I don't know about Sadiq Khan and his policies, but I know he does a lot for young people, and that's what most of his policies are around. Like even I think it was violence reduction units. He's had the other stuff, the programs, and making sure young people are not going down that pipeline. But him doing things is just not enough. It's done it in a governmental level, kind of like a governmental level. There needs to be something done like much below, and people, what they often do, which I agree is partially central government's responsibility, but the local authorities, the schools, the parents and primary caregivers and all these people also need to do something. It's not solely one person's responsibility, and which people fail to understand. It's all fit in, but even without that one piece, it's not going to work.
No, it's not going to work.
Elaborating that concept of school to prison pipeline, what implications do you think it has for early childhood education and intervention efforts? So from a much younger age, do you think it needs to happen?
I think from a much earlier age, I think there needs to be more mentors around. I think they need to have a lot more mentors, and I think that other interventions need to be more exposed to them and discussed with them. So, like consequential thinking, thinking about how they, the impact of what they've done, how it impacts the people around them, the ripple effect. That's another intervention. So, like when you throw a stone in the water and it creates this ripple effect. Again, you're looking at what you do as your behavior and how that can impact other people around you. I think it's about having those honest conversations continuously. It can't just be a one-off thing where they bring in mentors. I think a lot of these schools that are struggling, especially in primary schools, ones that are struggling with, kids and their behaviors, I think there needs to be some sort of measurement around, I don't know, sourcing some funding somewhere so they are allocated a mentor each, because consistency, from what I know, works. Consistency can change. Um, I'll show you another story where I was brought into work with a child that was involved in selling drugs, and he was also on the verge of being kicked out of education because he had special needs, but they were undiagnosed. He had an EHC plan as well. Everything was all there in that. But with him, when I was brought into work with him and my colleague, um, this boy, I didn't think he would change for the world. Every day that we met him, so we met him twice a week, it was a battle. I honestly did not think he would change. And it got to the point where, his mom didn't know what to do with him. His dad wasn't around. He had two younger sisters. And it just became very tiring. And eventually, after a year and a bit working with him, I remember him just quoting things I would say to him about like improving your life, just wanting better for himself. He started going to college. His school wasn't right for him. His school they weren't able to meet his needs. But I just remember with stuff like that, he eventually changed for the better. He actually did. He really did. And this is what I'm saying, with a testimony in that itself, consistency is the key. Being consistent, reminding them who they are, encouraging them. How can we help you? What's your next step? Where do you see yourself this time next year? Those are the kind of honest and transparent conversations that need to be had with these kids. Because if they keep going down a path and we're not addressing it, it becomes a bigger problem. It becomes a real big problem.
What role do you like implicit biases and cultural misunderstanding play in shaping the educator's perception of students, particularly those from a minority background, and how does it contribute, to their ability to succeed?
With a situation like that, I think it's if the child doesn't have someone, a professional or professionals that are aware of what's happening in that child's life, and if the child or children don't have professionals that are able to advocate and call out the parent, then it's going to be a big problem. Another thing that I can share with you is when I was working with a child who just came from the UK, and he basically, his mum fled their country because of domestic violence. So when they came here, she was actually here legally, and she was trying to apply to get her status here. And it was a backwards and forwards, and it got declined quite a lot of times. And because she didn't have a status here, she had no access to public funds. So she wasn't entitled to benefit. And you've got this child here who was 12 at the time. So he would be coming into school, brand new trainers, two mobile phones, expensive clothing. And it's when you look at stuff like that, it's what hope do you think that child has? Because the mum wasn't able to work, but she was actually working in a cleaning job illegally. The child is seeing all of this. The child is very aware, as you said earlier on, kids are very aware of what actually happens. They're not as silly as they look. So it's the child knew all this. So the child then took it upon himself that he had to now become the man of the house. And what that meant for him was for him to go out there and start working any means necessary. So, getting involved in an illegal activity, getting involved in an illegal activity just to make sure him and his mum were good. But, when I would attend these meetings talking about that child, professionals, number one will be, he has to go to school. He has to go to school. Why is he not in school? And I remember saying, in the meeting, why do you think he's not in school? That you've got a child whose mum has got no access to public funds. She can't work. He now has taken it upon himself to be man of the house. So what do you think is going to happen? Do you think school is going to be his priority? And luckily with that, because of the way I was in that meeting, they then had to take it on board. And then they had to now, get him more mentors, try and help mum with her status, try and get mum accommodation as well, because they were living with family. It was a lot. And this is the thing about professionals, and why it frustrates me so much is education is the key, definitely, because I love education myself. But the thing is, when you have a child that is so young and is quite new to the UK, and they've got all these obstacles that they're faced against, education is not going to be their priority. It's other things. Have they got a bed to sleep on? Have they even got uniform to get to school? Have they even got money? Because this child didn't have money to go to school. He didn't even have a bus pass. He didn't even have an Oyster card because of how bad things were. So it's like my thing is whenever I would go into meetings when I was working for the Youth Justice Service, I have to state the obvious. Yes, you want the child to go to school, but is that child, are his needs being met? Is he sleeping in a warm environment? Is he are his Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Are all his needs, basic needs, being met for you to even start talking about school? I think we need to look at the deeper issue here. In order for us to get that child to go to school, are the basic needs being met? And if the basic needs are not being met, then that child's priority will not be school. It will not be education. No matter how many times I say to that, because I would say it when I first started, I did say to the child, you need to go to school, you need to go to school, you need to go. Then I had to look at myself and check myself and say, but Azi, how do you expect this child to go to school if their basic needs are not even being met? He doesn't even have his own bedroom. Let's start with that. He doesn't even have his own bedroom. His mum's hasn't got a job, a legitimate job. How do you expect that child to make school his number one if his basic needs aren't being met? And with that story, that taught me a lot about myself, and it made me realize it's really, really important not to just go with the masses. You don't just jump on the bandwagon with what all other professionals are saying. Look at the bigger scheme of things here. If I want this child to be successful, where am I supposed to start? I start by meeting his basic needs. So pushing and ensuring that the social workers doing what they're supposed to do, because I know that we are all overworked. We all have a lot of cases on, but if you're not meeting the basic needs of the child, then you're not doing your job. And for me, for some people, I'd be like, "Oh, that's a bit harsh." No, it's not. It is as simple as that, because we're getting paid to do a job. And if you're not able to execute that, then there's a problem. You're in the wrong line of work, because you are guiding that child onto a better future.
Can you share examples of innovative approaches and interventions that have shown promise in disrupting the school to prison pipeline and promoting positive outcomes for young people?
Yeah, sure. So again, with the child that I used to work with, the one that I said had special needs and had a EHC plan, because I was able to work with him. So this is how it worked. So to disrupt him being further involved in selling drugs 5 days a week, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we would all meet up with him. So on the Monday, he had a clinical psychologist that was able to diagnose his undiagnosed learning need. That's what it was called. So we had that. And then on the Tuesday, he would then have a youth worker who would then engage in activities like talking about driving and taking him to the gym. Then on Wednesdays, he would have his social worker that was, ensuring that he was entitled to all the bursary that he was meant to get, to ensure that his education was up to a high standard, and if not, for him to go to another place to learn. Then on Thursdays, I would take him to football. So he had football training every Thursday, and he was really good at football. He was really, really good. And myself and my colleague would just stay with him to the end of his football trials. And then on Friday, he would also do another activity where he would go and do some like independent shopping. So he would go with another two workers where they'll go out into the community, they'll talk to him and get him to learn about budgeting money, spending habits, healthy habits, financial literacy. And this went on for over a year. And believe it or not, the boy then stopped wanting to even talk about selling drugs. He was more about future focused. It was more about, I want better for myself. I deserve better for myself. And that was because of myself and my colleagues. We were all on the same page. So then being about on the same page makes such a huge impact. And we would discuss what we're going to do moving forward, and would always keep his mum in the loop.
Something that can that's something he had something to do pretty much every single day.
Yeah.
That distraction, is so key, and he's doing all the things that he's interested in and wants to do and is happy doing.
Yeah.
And that's just amazing. And people are actually listening to him, which people don't do that often. It seems so simple, but for some people it's just so complex to comprehend. Don't understand why it is. Yeah, I feel like that's just a great way to end. Looking back on our conversation, what's the most important takeaway or message you want our audience to remember?
I think it's really important that when it comes to working with children, that they are going to become adults, and they are going to, in a couple of years, whenever that is, when they do bump into you as that professional that did help them, they will always remember you. They will stop you, they will talk to you. So I think it's about knowing that you're planting seeds for their future, and that is something that they'll be forever grateful for. Another thing that I've learned is you can't help every single child. You can't. And that's something that I do still struggle to take on board, but I feel like I've come to the realization of that you can't. Sometimes you just can't do it because they're just too far in, too deep into whatever it is that they're involved in. So no matter what you do, you can't change their mindset. And that's not a negative on your part as a professional, but that's just because they've got stronger negative factors out there that are putting them more into that. So I would say it's about taking away, I'd like for people to take away that just give every child a chance and treat them as your own, or your brother or your sister, or as your neighbor to an extent, because you just never know who or what they can become in the future. You just never know. And it's about removing your biases and thinking about, removing that and removing what you thought growing up or what you experienced from a certain individual. So it's about reflecting on your practices and ensuring that you do get, the refreshers that you need, and things that you're unsure about when it comes to working with kids. Ask questions. Ask your manager questions. Ask the kids' parents questions. Do not be afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations, because you just never know, where that's going to lead down to.
Finally, what's one thing that you're grateful for today?
I am grateful for all the kids I've ever worked with, because if it wasn't for them, I think I didn't share this earlier on, but one of the main reasons why I'm probably so driven when it comes to my career and self-improvement is because of them. there's a lot of times when I've worked with kids that have challenged me in a positive way, and they've made me reflect on my practices and made me want to do better for myself. Because the world is your oyster, and they're the ones that made me go back to university to do my masters. Believe it or not, it's because of them. It's all because of them. So I'm forever grateful. The bad, the good scenarios, the ugly scenarios, the times when I've even got emotional because I felt so useless, I've not been able to help. But I am so grateful for every single encounter that I've had with all of them. They've made me who I am today as a professional, and I'm proud of that. I'm extremely proud of that.
That's amazing. You've come like so far in like all the things that you've done.
Thank you.
Will help continuing to help other people, which is absolutely amazing. That concludes another thought-provoking episode of My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm Iconic. We hope this conversation has shed light on the complexity of the youth justice and the urgent need to address the pervasive issue of the school-to-prison pipeline. Before we part ways, let's take a moment to reflect on some key takeaways from our discussion. We learned about the detrimental impact of schools to prison pipeline on our youth, particularly those from marginalised communities, and the systematic factors that perpetuates this cycle. Our guest, Azi, provided valuable insights into the challenges faced by young people within the criminal justice system and highlighted the importance of early intervention and community support. Together, we'll explore potential solutions from implementing restorative justice practices to advocating for policy reforms that prioritise rehabilitation and education over punitive measures. Now, as we bring this episode to a close, we want to express our heartfelt thank you to our guest, Azi Azonga, for sharing their expertise and passion with us today. Your dedication to youth justice is truly inspiring. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Your engagement and support is what drives us to continue these important conversations. Remember, the journey towards a more just and equitable society doesn't end here. It's up to each and every one of us to take action, advocate for change, and uplift the voices of those affected by injustice. Stay iconic. Until next time.